Arizona Territory, 1875. The unforgiving sun beat down on the parched earth, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Copper Springs. In this harsh landscape where men and women carved out existence with calloused hands and iron determination, Isaac Newcombe had learned one truth. Attachment was a luxury he couldn't afford. At 25, he'd already buried more friends than most men twice his age, watched good cowboys fall to bullets, illness, and the merciless elements. The West takes everything you love eventually, he often told himself, a mantra that kept his heart guarded behind a wall as solid as the distant mountains. It was easier this way, to drift from ranch to ranch, drive to drive, taking pride in honest work while avoiding the entanglements that would only lead to pain when the West inevitably claimed its due. The late afternoon sun glinted off Isaac's silver spurs as he dismounted outside Hadley's general store. At 6'1" with broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, he cut an impressive figure even in trail-worn clothes. His dark brown hair, a touch too long, curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and his eyes, a striking blue that seemed out of place against his sun-bronzed skin, carried a watchfulness that made him appear older than his years. His immediate needs were simple: supplies for the trail ahead, maybe a hot meal if Mrs. Hadley was feeling generous with her stew. Tomorrow, he'd ride north to the Blackwater Ranch, where they needed experienced hands for the fall roundup. Another season, another paycheck, another temporary stop, just the way he preferred it. "Mr. Newcombe," old man Hadley called out as Isaac entered the store, "thought you'd left these parts for good." Isaac nodded politely. "Just passing through, sir. Need some provisions before heading to the Blackwater outfit." "Well, you picked a fine time to return," Hadley said, leaning across the worn counter. "Town's buzzing with news. The Zimmerman place has a new occupant, widow from back east with her little boy. Moved into her late uncle's homestead just last week." Isaac merely grunted in response, having little interest in town gossip. He focused on gathering his supplies: coffee, beans, salt pork, ammunition for his Winchester rifle. The less he knew about the people of Copper Springs, the easier it would be to ride away when the time came. As Isaac paid for his goods, a commotion erupted outside. A woman's voice, pitched high with fear, carried through the open doorway. "Please, my son is burning with fever. I need a doctor." Curiosity, more than concern, drew Isaac to the doorway. There, in the middle of the street, stood a young woman in a dusty blue dress, holding a small boy who hung limply in her arms. Her chestnut hair, partially escaped from its pins, framed a face beautiful even in distress. She couldn't have been more than 22 years old. "Doc Peterson's out at the Hamilton place," Hadley called from behind Isaac. "Their youngest took a fall from the hayloft, won't be back till tomorrow at earliest." The woman's face crumpled. "Tomorrow may be too late. Please, is there anyone who can help?" The townsfolk murmured sympathetically but kept their distance. Fever could mean many things in the territory, some of them deadly and contagious. Isaac meant to step back to secure his supplies and move on. This wasn't his problem. Then the boy coughed, a wet, rattling sound that reminded him too much of his younger brother in those final terrible days. "Ma'am," he found himself saying, stepping forward. "The Blackwater Ranch has a man, Joseph Little Crow, who knows medicine. Indian remedies mostly, but I've seen him pull cowboys through worse than fevers." Hope flickered across her face. "Where is this ranch?" 20 miles north, too far to walk, especially with a sick child." Isaac hesitated, knowing he was about to complicate his carefully uncomplicated life. "I'm heading there myself. I could take you." "You would do that?" Her green eyes, bright with unshed tears, searched his face. "I would, ma'am, but I should warn you, my mare's already carrying my gear and she's not the youngest. She won't make good time with 3 of us." The woman stepped forward, desperation clear in every line of her body. "I'm Katherine Zimmerman. This is my son, William. He's only 4 and he's all I have in this world." She swallowed hard. "Please, Mr. Newcombe, Isaac Newcombe." "Mr. Newcombe, I have a wagon but no horse. My uncle's old mare died last week. I've written to purchase another, but the letter won't even reach Denver for days yet." She held her son closer. "I'll pay whatever you ask. Just help me get William to this healer." Isaac looked at the boy's flushed face, then at his own horse, Dusty, who'd carried him faithfully for 7 years through everything the frontier could throw at them. The animal was more than transportation. She was companion, coworker, and sometimes the difference between life and death. But the boy's labored breathing left no room for hesitation. "No payment necessary, Mrs. Zimmerman, Isaac said, already untying his saddlebags. We'll take your wagon and Dusty will pull it. She's strong and knows the trail. If we leave now, we can make the ranch by nightfall. Relief washed over Katherine's face. Thank you. Thank you so much. As Isaac helped them into the wagon and hitched Dusty to the front, he tried to ignore the voice in his head warning him that he was making a mistake. Attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got people killed out here. But as they set out on the northern trail, the little boy burning with fever in his mother's arms, Isaac knew he couldn't have chosen differently. What he didn't know was that giving up his last horse to save a widow's child would change everything he thought he understood about life on the frontier. The wagon jostled along the rough trail, each bump drawing a whimper from the feverish child. Isaac kept the pace as quick as he dared, balancing speed against the need to avoid further hurting the boy. Beside him on the wagon seat, Katherine Zimmerman sat rigid with worry, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the bench. "How long have you been in the territory, Mrs. Zimmerman?" Isaac asked, more to distract her than from genuine curiosity. 10 days, she answered, her gaze never leaving her son. "And please call me Katherine." Isaac raised an eyebrow. 10 days. And already facing fever and hardship, the West isn't kind to newcomers. "We had little choice," she replied, finally glancing at him. "My husband died last winter, influenza. When I received word that my uncle had passed and left his homestead to me, it seemed providential, a chance to start anew." Isaac nodded but said nothing. He'd seen too many Easterners arrive with dreams of new beginnings only to be broken by the reality of frontier life. "You think I was foolish," she said, reading his silence. "I think the territory can be unforgiving, especially to those unprepared for its challenges," he answered carefully. "A woman alone with a child." "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Newcombe," she interrupted, a flash of steel in her green eyes. "And not as unprepared as you might think. My father was a blacksmith. I grew up learning to work with my hands. Before Thomas, my husband, I helped run my father's books. I can read, write, cipher, and I'm a quick study with anything practical." Isaac found himself reassessing the young widow. Beneath the fine features and delicate appearance, there was a determination he recognized, the same kind that kept people alive out here when nature and circumstance conspired against them. "And what do you know of ranching or farming?" he asked. "Admittedly little," she conceded. "But the land is good, according to the letters my uncle sent over the years. 15 acres with water rights to Copper Creek. There's a small orchard already producing, and the cabin, while basic, is sound. We can learn what we need to know." Isaac nodded, though doubt remained. Even established homesteaders struggled through drought, harsh winters, and the 1,000 natural disasters that could wipe out a year's work in moments. As if sensing his thoughts, Katherine continued, "We've already weathered one storm, Mr. Newcombe. The day after we arrived, a man visited, dressed like a gentleman but with eyes cold as a snake's. He offered to buy the property, said a woman couldn't possibly manage it alone. When I refused, he suggested I would regret my decision." Isaac frowned. Did this man give his name? "Hollister. Victor Hollister." The name sent a chill down Isaac's spine. Victor Hollister was known throughout the territory as a man who acquired what he wanted regardless of legal niceties. If Hollister had set his sights on the Zimmerman property, Katherine had more immediate problems than learning to farm. "Mrs. Zimmerman, Katherine," Isaac said carefully, "Hollister isn't someone to take lightly. He's been buying up land all around Copper Creek, sometimes through means that wouldn't bear close scrutiny." Fear flickered briefly across her face before resolve replaced it. "All the more reason we need this land. It's all William and I have." The boy moaned in her arms, drawing their attention back to the immediate crisis. His small face was flushed with fever, his breathing more labored than before. "We need to cool him down," Isaac said, spotting a creek ahead. He guided Dusty toward the water. "We'll stop briefly. The water here runs cold." At the creekside, Isaac lifted the boy from Katherine's arms, surprised at how light he felt. They worked together, soaking cloths in the cool water and placing them on William's forehead, neck, and wrists. The boy whimpered but didn't wake. "Will we make it in time?" Katherine asked, fear naked in her voice. Isaac met her gaze steadily. "Yes," he said with more confidence than he felt. "Dusty may be my last horse, but she's the best I've ever known. She'll get us there." As they continued their journey, Isaac found himself watching Katherine with the child, noting the gentle way she spoke to him even in unconsciousness, the prayers she whispered, the fierce protectiveness in every touch. It stirred something in him, memories of his own mother, perhaps, or simply recognition of the kind of love he'd convinced himself was a liability in this harsh land. By late afternoon, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and Isaac's concern deepened. A downpour would turn the trail to mud, slowing them dangerously. "There's a line shack about 2 miles ahead," he said, eyeing the darkening sky. "We might need to shelter there if the storm hits before we reach the ranch." Katherine nodded, too focused on her son to argue. The boy's condition was worsening. His breathing now came in short, painful gasps. They had just reached the turnoff to the line shack when the first fat raindrops began to fall. Isaac hesitated, torn between seeking immediate shelter and pushing on to reach help. "How much farther to the ranch?" Katherine asked, somehow reading his dilemma. "Another 8 miles, in good weather less than 2 hours. In this," he gestured at the rapidly deteriorating conditions, "longer." Katherine looked down at her son, then back at Isaac, her decision clear in her eyes. "We continue." "Please." Isaac nodded, silently urging Dusty forward into the strengthening rain. The loyal mare leaned into her task, hooves striking a steady rhythm despite the increasingly muddy trail. The storm intensified, lashing them with driving rain that reduced visibility to mere yards. Isaac's coat was soon soaked through, and Katherine huddled over William, trying to shield him with her body. Despite her efforts, the boy was getting wet, a dangerous development given his fever. Without a word, Isaac removed his coat and handed it to Katherine. "Use this to cover him," he said, raising his voice to be heard over the storm. "But you'll freeze," she protested. "I've endured worse," he replied, which was true enough. He'd spent countless nights on the open range in conditions far more severe than this spring storm. Katherine accepted the coat, wrapping it around William. The boy seemed to settle slightly under the additional protection. For another hour, they battled through the storm, the wagon wheels occasionally sinking into mud that threatened to halt their progress entirely. Each time, Isaac would climb down, his boots squelching in the thick mud, and urge Dusty forward with soft words and a steady hand. The mare responded with a determination that matched his own, pulling them free time after time. "She's remarkable," Katherine said after one such episode, watching Isaac stroke Dusty's wet neck in gratitude. "Best horse I've ever had," Isaac agreed, climbing back onto the wagon seat. "Saved my life more times than I can count. Outran Comanche raiders 2 years back when most horses would have folded. Got me through a blizzard in '73 that killed half the cattle and 3 cowboys on the drive I was working." Katherine studied him through the rain. "You speak of her like she's family." Isaac didn't respond immediately. In truth, Dusty was the closest thing to family he had left. After losing his parents to cholera and his brother to pneumonia, he'd learned to keep his circle small and mobile. Dusty was the one constant he allowed himself. "Out here," he finally said, "your horse is often the difference between life and death. You learn to value that." "Like you're valuing her now," Katherine observed quietly, "by risking her to save my son." The simple truth of her words struck Isaac with unexpected force. He was risking Dusty, pushing his aging mare to her limits for strangers he'd met only hours ago. It went against everything he'd taught himself about survival on the frontier. Before he could examine this unsettling realization further, the silhouette of Blackwater Ranch emerged from the rain-soaked landscape. Lights glowed in the windows of the main house and bunkhouse, beckoning like beacons in the storm. "We made it," he told Katherine, relief evident in his voice. As they pulled into the ranch yard, cowboys emerged from the bunkhouse, curious about visitors arriving in such weather. Isaac called out for Joseph Little Crow, and within moments a man of mixed Pawnee and white heritage approached the wagon. "Isaac," Joseph greeted him, then took in the situation with a single glance. "Bring the child inside." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Joseph examined William thoroughly before preparing a mixture of herbs and roots that he insisted the boy drink. When William was too weak to swallow, Katherine held him while Joseph spooned the bitter liquid into his mouth, drop by precious drop. "The fever is very high," Joseph said gravely. "If it does not break by morning, I cannot promise he will survive." Katherine's face paled, but she nodded with the stoic acceptance Isaac was beginning to recognize as her core strength. "What can I do?" she asked simply. "Stay with him. Keep him cool, make him drink when possible." Joseph handed her more of his medicine. "Every 2 hours this much," he indicated a small measure. Isaac, feeling suddenly superfluous, retreated to the bunkhouse to check on Dusty. The mare was being well tended by the ranch hands, already dry and munching contentedly on hay. She nickered softly when Isaac approached, nudging his chest with her velvety muzzle. "You did good, old girl," he murmured, stroking her neck. "Real good." He should feel satisfied, he thought. He'd done what was needed, gotten the boy to help, and tomorrow he could start his job as planned. Yet as he looked toward the main house where Katherine kept vigil over her son, Isaac felt strangely unfinished, as though a story had begun whose ending he needed to see. Morning arrived with clearing skies and news that William's fever had broken sometime in the night. Isaac found Katherine on the ranch house porch, her face showing exhaustion but profound relief. "Joseph says he'll recover completely," she told Isaac, a tremulous smile lighting her features. "He's sleeping naturally now." "I'm glad," Isaac said, genuinely meaning it. "Joseph knows his medicine." "I don't know how to thank you," Katherine began, "without your help." "No need for thanks," Isaac interrupted, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." Katherine's gaze was direct, challenging. "No, Mr. Newcombe, not anyone. Several people in town heard my plea before you stepped forward. You gave up your horse, risked her in terrible conditions for strangers." Isaac shifted his weight, eager to change the subject. "When do you think you'll be able to travel back to Copper Springs?" "Joseph says William should rest at least 3 more days before attempting the journey." She hesitated. "I know you have work here. We won't impose on your time further. Perhaps someone else could take us when William is stronger." Isaac nodded, relief mixing strangely with disappointment. "I'm sure that can be arranged. The ranch foreman, Mr. Garrett, is a fair man. He'll help you." "And Dusty," Katherine asked. "Will she recover from her exertions?" "She's tough, but she'll need rest too," Isaac admitted. "I won't be riding her on Roundup for a few days at least." "Then I've delayed your work as well as risked your horse," Katherine said, distress evident in her voice. "Mr. Newcombe, I insist on compensating you." "Isaac," he corrected her, "and no compensation is necessary. I made my choice." He paused, then added more gently, "Sometimes helping others is its own reward." The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. They weren't the sort of sentiment he typically voiced, believing as he did that such thinking was dangerous in a land where self-reliance was the key to survival. Yet standing there in the clear morning light, facing this woman who had crossed a continent with nothing but her child and her courage, Isaac felt something shift inside him, a small crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. "Thank you, Isaac," Katherine said softly. "Not just for your help, but for reminding me that even in this wild place, goodness exists." He nodded, suddenly unable to meet her gaze, and turned toward the bunkhouse. He had work to do, a job to start, a life to continue exactly as he'd planned it. But as the days passed, Isaac found himself drawn repeatedly to the main house, checking on William's recovery, bringing small treats from the cook for the boy, finding excuses to speak with Katherine. Each conversation revealed more about her intelligence, her dry humor, her practical approach to the challenges ahead. On the third evening, as they sat on the ranch house porch watching William play with the ranch dogs, Katherine turned to Isaac with a thoughtful expression. "What keeps you moving, Isaac? Why not settle somewhere, build something of your own?" The question caught him off guard. Most people accepted a cowboy's wandering life without question. "The West takes everything you love eventually," he said, voicing the belief that had guided him for years. "Seems safer not to put down roots, not to get too attached." Katherine considered this. "A life without attachment may be safer," she said slowly, "but is it living or just surviving?" The question lingered between them, unanswered but not forgotten, as the time approached for Katherine and William to return to Copper Springs. When Joseph pronounced the boy fit to travel, arrangements were made for one of the ranch hands to drive them back in a wagon. Isaac told himself he was relieved. The situation had already complicated his life more than he'd intended. Once they were gone, he could return to the familiar rhythm of ranch work and open trail. Yet on the morning of their departure, Isaac found himself unable to simply bid them farewell. Instead, he approached the ranch foreman with a request for a few days' leave, something he'd never asked for before. "I'll escort Mrs. Zimmerman and her son back to Copper Springs," he told a surprised Katherine as she prepared to depart. "Make sure you arrive safely. But your work here." "We'll wait," he finished. "Besides, I'm not much use until Dusty's fully recovered. Might as well make myself useful elsewhere." The truth, which he barely admitted even to himself, was that he needed to see this through. needed to know that Katherine and William would be secure in their new home. It was a responsibility he hadn't sought but couldn't seem to relinquish. What he didn't anticipate was how the journey back would further crack the walls around his heart, or how the sight of their small homestead, modest but full of potential, would stir long-buried dreams of his own. And he certainly didn't expect that upon reaching Copper Springs, they would find Katherine's cabin ransacked and a crude warning nailed to the door: leave or burn. The threat, almost certainly from Hollister or his men, changed everything. As Katherine stood frozen before her violated home, William clinging fearfully to her skirts, Isaac made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. "You're not staying here alone," he said firmly. "Not until this is settled." Katherine turned to him, her expression a complex mixture of fear, anger, and determination. "This is my home, Isaac. I won't be driven from it by threats." "I'm not suggesting you abandon it," he clarified. "But until we deal with Hollister, you and William need protection." "We?" she questioned, catching the pronoun. Isaac met her gaze steadily. "Yes, I gave Dusty to save your son. I'm not about to let that investment go to waste by allowing some land-grabbing snake to harm either of you." Katherine's expression softened. "You've already done more than enough, Isaac. This isn't your fight." "Maybe not," he conceded. "But I'm making it mine anyway." As they stood before the damaged cabin, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that what had begun as a simple act of compassion had grown into something neither had anticipated. For Isaac, it was the uncomfortable realization that despite years of careful detachment, he had somehow become entangled in lives he couldn't walk away from. For Katherine, it appeared to be both gratitude and wariness, the caution of a woman who had already lost one husband to fate and wasn't eager to risk her heart or her son's well-being on a man whose nature was to wander. Yet as they began the work of repairing the cabin and securing it against further threats, neither could deny the connection forming between them, a bond forged in crisis and strengthened by shared purpose. In the days that followed, Isaac split his time between helping Katherine restore order to her homestead and quietly investigating Hollister's activities in town. What he discovered confirmed his suspicions. Hollister was systematically acquiring properties along Copper Creek, sometimes through intimidation, sometimes through more subtle pressure. The purpose became clear when Isaac learned of plans for a dam and reservoir that would make water rights in the area immensely valuable. "Your uncle's 15 acres are the key piece Hollister needs," Isaac explained to Katherine one evening as they sat on her newly repaired porch. William was already asleep inside, exhausted from a day of helping Isaac repair fences. "His land holdings surround yours on 3 sides. The creek runs through your property at its deepest point. Without it, his dam project is useless." Katherine's face hardened. "So he thinks he can frighten a widow and child off their land for his profit." "Men like Hollister see only what they want," Isaac said, "not the lives they destroy getting it." "What can we do?" "The law is 3 days' ride away," Isaac interrupted gently. "And the sheriff in these parts is known to look favorably on those with deep pockets." "Then we're defenseless," Katherine concluded, her shoulders slumping. "Not defenseless," Isaac corrected, "just outnumbered for now." He didn't elaborate, but his mind was already working on a plan, one that would require calling in favors from men he'd ridden with over the years, cowboys who understood the unwritten code of the West that demanded standing up for those who couldn't protect themselves. That night, as Isaac bedded down in the small lean-to attached to Katherine's cabin, his temporary quarters while he helped secure the property, he confronted the reality of what he was doing. For the first time in years, he was putting down tentative roots, involving himself in a situation with no easy exit. More unsettling still, he found himself thinking of Katherine in ways that went beyond concern for her safety. He noticed the grace with which she moved, the quiet strength she showed in the face of adversity, the way the evening light caught the auburn highlights in her chestnut hair. He admired her determination to create a home for William despite overwhelming odds, and her willingness to work alongside him, never complaining despite hands blistered from unfamiliar labor. These thoughts were dangerous. Attachment meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant eventual pain. The West took everything you loved sooner or later. He'd seen it happen too many times to count. Yet as sleep finally claimed him, Isaac found himself wondering if perhaps the real risk wasn't in caring too much, but in never caring enough to make a stand for something, or someone, worth fighting for. Morning brought a visitor, Joseph Little Crow, unexpectedly arrived from Blackwater Ranch with news. Hollister's men were asking questions about the widow and her son, Joseph told Isaac as they spoke privately near the corral. They seem especially interested in when she might return. Isaac's jaw tightened. They're planning something. Joseph nodded. The ranch foreman sent me to warn you. He also said if you need help, you only need to send word. The offer touched Isaac deeply. Cowboys were a brotherhood of sorts, bound by shared hardship and an unspoken code. That Garrett would extend such support spoke volumes. Tell him I'm grateful, Isaac said. And that I may take him up on that offer soon. After Joseph departed, Isaac found Katherine at the well, drawing water for the day's needs. The morning sun caught in her hair, turning it to burnished gold where it escaped her practical bun. She wore a simple calico dress, its blue fabric faded from washing but neat and well-mended. We had a visitor, he said, taking the heavy bucket from her despite her protests. Joseph brought news from the ranch. He explained what Joseph had told him, watching her face carefully for signs of fear. Instead, he saw only the now familiar determination harden her features. So Hollister is planning his next move, she said, her voice steady. Then we should plan ours. Katherine, Isaac began cautiously, have you considered that it might be safer to sell? To take William somewhere with more people, more protection. Her green eyes flashed. You think I should give in to bullying, let a man like Hollister teach my son that threats and violence are rewarded? I think, Isaac said carefully, that staying means risking everything. Are you prepared for that? Are you, she countered. You could walk away, Isaac, return to the life you had before. This isn't your fight. The challenge in her words struck him like a physical blow. She was right, he could leave. There was nothing forcing him to stand with her against Hollister. Nothing except the knowledge that walking away would mean reverting to the man he'd been before, solitary, detached, surviving but not truly living. I gave Dusty to save William, he said quietly. I'm not about to abandon either of you now, but you need to understand what we're facing. Hollister won't stop with threats. He's invested too much in his damn project to be deterred easily. Katherine's expression softened. I understand the risk, Isaac, but this land is William's future, his security. If I surrender it, what lesson does he learn? That his mother lacks the courage to fight for what's rightfully his. Put that way, Isaac could hardly argue. All right, he conceded, but if we're going to stand against Hollister, we need a plan and allies. Over the next several days, Isaac called in every favor he was owed. Cowboys he'd ridden with, a Paiute scout whose life he'd once saved, even the telegraph operator in town who remembered Isaac's help during a flash flood the previous spring. Slowly he built a network of eyes and ears that kept him informed of Hollister's movements and plans. What they learned was troubling. Hollister had hired additional men, not cowboys but hardened fighters with reputations for violence. They were gathering at Hollister's ranch, presumably preparing for a decisive move against the Zimmerman property. They'll come at night, Isaac told Katherine as they sat at her kitchen table, poring over a rough map he'd drawn of the property. Probably try to fire the cabin, force you out, then claim you abandoned the land. Katherine's face paled, but her voice remained steady. How do we stop them? We make it too costly for them to proceed, Isaac said simply. Hollister is a businessman at heart. If protecting this property costs him more than it's worth, he'll back down. And how do we manage that? We're two people against his hired guns. Isaac allowed himself a small smile. Not quite two. The next day brought the first of their reinforcements, 3 cowboys from Blackwater Ranch, sent by Garrett with his compliments and the message that they were at Isaac's disposal for as long as needed. The day after, Isaac's Paiute friend arrived with his 2 brothers. By week's end, their defensive force numbered 12, a mix of cowboys, miners, and frontiersmen who owed Isaac favors or simply despised Hollister enough to stand against him. Katherine watched these preparations with a mixture of gratitude and concern. I never intended to bring violence to our doorstep, she told Isaac one evening as they walked the perimeter of her property, checking defenses. Sometimes violence finds you whether you invite it or not, Isaac replied. The question is whether you face it on your terms or someone else's. And if someone is hurt or worse, her voice caught. How do I live with that? Isaac stopped walking, turning to face her in the fading light. Katherine, listen to me. What we're doing isn't seeking violence, it's preventing it. Hollister thinks you're an easy target. Once he realizes you're not, he'll back down. Men like him don't risk themselves or their investments on lost causes. She studied his face, seeming to search for reassurance. You sound very certain. I've known men like Hollister before, Isaac said grimly. They prey on the vulnerable, show strength, and they look for easier targets. Katherine nodded slowly. I trust your judgment, Isaac. I just pray you're right. That night, Isaac lay awake long after the others had settled, his mind racing with preparations and contingencies. He had positioned men strategically around the property, established signals, and prepared fallback positions. They were as ready as they could be, yet doubt gnawed at him. Was he risking these men's lives, risking Katherine and William, based on a judgment clouded by feelings he scarcely understood? Was this stand against Hollister truly about justice, or was it his own need to prove something, to Katherine, to himself? The questions troubled him until dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold. Rising, he found Katherine already awake, preparing breakfast for the men who had come to her aid. You didn't sleep, she observed, handing him a cup of coffee. Neither did you, he countered, accepting the cup gratefully. She offered a tired smile, too much thinking. About. Katherine hesitated, then said, about how quickly life changes. 3 weeks ago I was alone with William, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake coming west. Now my home is an armed camp, and a man I barely know is risking everything to help us. Do you regret it? Isaac asked quietly, coming west. No, she answered without hesitation. For all its dangers, there's a freedom here I never found in the East, a chance to build something truly mine. She paused. And despite everything, I've found kindness here too. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Isaac felt something shift between them, a recognition of feelings neither had voiced but both increasingly acknowledged. Before he could respond, however, a warning call came from one of their lookouts. Riders coming, at least 15. Isaac moved quickly to the window, Katherine close behind him. In the distance, a cloud of dust signaled approaching horsemen. Too many for a simple intimidation, Isaac muttered. Hollister means to end this today. Katherine's hand found his arm. What do we do? Isaac covered her hand with his own. We stand firm. Show them we're prepared and determined. He looked down at her, his expression grave. But if things go badly, promise me you'll take William and escape through the back trail we prepared. Joseph's people will hide you until it's safe. I won't leave you to face them alone, she protested. Katherine, Isaac said, his voice low and intense, William needs his mother. Promise me. After a long moment she nodded, though the set of her jaw suggested the concession cost her dearly. I promise, but it won't come to that. I believe in what we're doing and in you. Her faith humbled him. With a final squeeze of her hand, Isaac moved to organize their defense. Men took positions behind stone walls, in the root cellar, among the apple trees of the small orchard. William was sent to the storm cellar with provisions and strict instructions to stay hidden until his mother came for him. As Hollister's men drew nearer, Isaac took his position on the porch, deliberately exposed. This was a calculated risk, showing Hollister that they weren't hiding, weren't afraid, but were prepared to defend what was theirs. The riders halted 100 yards from the cabin. At their head sat Victor Hollister himself, a heavy-set man in an expensive Eastern suit that looked absurdly out of place in the dusty landscape. Flanking him were hard-faced men whose hands rested too casually near their holstered weapons. Mrs. Zimmerman, Hollister called out, I've come to discuss our business again. Katherine emerged from the cabin to stand beside Isaac. We have no business, Mr. Hollister, she replied, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. This land is mine, legally deeded. It is not for sale. Hollister's face darkened. I think you misunderstand the situation, madam. This isn't a negotiation, it's an eviction. He gestured to his men. You have one chance to gather your belongings and leave peacefully. After that, I cannot be responsible for what happens. Isaac stepped forward. I think it's you who misunderstands, Hollister. Mrs. Zimmerman isn't alone. At his signal, their defenders revealed themselves one by one, rifles appearing from behind walls, men stepping from the shadows of the barn, others rising from concealed positions in the tall grass. Hollister's confident expression faltered as he counted the armed men surrounding the property. This clearly wasn't the helpless widow he'd expected to intimidate. This is none of your concern, cowboy, Hollister snapped at Isaac. This is business between Mrs. Zimmerman and myself. Mrs. Zimmerman's concerns are my concerns, Isaac replied evenly. And our business with you is concluded. This land isn't for sale, not today, not tomorrow, not ever. A tense silence followed, broken only by the nervous shuffling of horses. Isaac could see Hollister's men exchanging uneasy glances. They'd signed on to intimidate a woman and child, not face a determined force of armed defenders. Hollister's face flushed with anger. "You're making a serious mistake," he growled. "I have friends in territorial government, connections you can't imagine. This isn't over." "Yes, it is," came a new voice from behind Hollister's group. All heads turned to see a party of riders approaching from the east, a dozen men led by a figure Isaac recognized instantly. Federal Marshal James Burke, known throughout the territory as a man of absolute integrity and unflinching nerve. Hollister's face drained of color. "Marshal Burke, this is a private matter." "Threatening citizens, attempted land theft, conspiracy to commit arson," Burke interrupted, his voice cold as he reached Hollister's side. "Those sound like public matters to me, Mr. Hollister." Isaac felt Katherine's hand slip into his as the marshal continued. "I've been investigating your business practices for some time," Burke informed Hollister. "Your dam project caught the attention of the Federal Land Office when surveyors noted it would illegally redirect water from Indian reservations downstream. Your little visit today provides the evidence I've been waiting for." Hollister spluttered protests, but Burke merely gestured to his deputies. "Take Mr. Hollister and his associates into custody. We'll sort out individual charges back in town." As Hollister's men were disarmed and led away, Marshal Burke approached Isaac and Katherine. "Mr. Newcombe," he greeted Isaac with a nod. "Your telegraph message reached me just in time. Mrs. Zimmerman, I presume." Katherine stepped forward. "Yes, Marshal, thank you for coming." "No thanks necessary, ma'am. The law applies to rich men same as poor ones, at least while I wear this badge." Burke glanced at the armed men now emerging from their defensive positions. "Impressive show of force you organized, Newcombe." Isaac shrugged. "Good men standing against injustice, Marshal, nothing more." "Indeed," Burke's weathered face creased in a smile. "Well, Mrs. Zimmerman, you can rest easy. Hollister will face federal charges. Even if he escapes conviction, his assets will be tied up for years. Your land is safe." As the marshal departed with his prisoners, the tension that had gripped the homestead for weeks finally broke. The defenders celebrated with whoops and backslapping, relief evident in every face. Katherine hurried to retrieve William from his hiding place, the boy emerging wide-eyed but unafraid to find his home suddenly filled with cheering men. Amid the celebration, Isaac slipped away to the corral where Dusty stood watching the commotion. The mare nudged his shoulder as he approached, and he stroked her neck absently, his mind whirling with the implications of the day's events. It was over. Katherine and William were safe. The purpose that had kept him at the Zimmerman homestead was fulfilled. By all rights, he should collect his gear and move on, return to the life of a drifting cowboy, untethered and unencumbered. Yet the thought brought no satisfaction, only a hollow ache he couldn't quite name. Isaac. He turned to find Katherine standing at the corral gate, her eyes searching his face. "You disappeared," she said softly. "The men are asking for you. They want to toast the man who organized our defense." Isaac managed a smile. "They did the standing, I just pointed them in the right direction." Katherine stepped closer. "Is that all you did, pointed men in a direction?" Her gaze was intent, challenging. "Or did you finally find something worth standing for yourself?" The directness of her question struck him like a physical blow. For weeks, he'd been telling himself he was helping Katherine and William out of obligation, out of basic decency, out of any reason that didn't require examining the growing feelings he harbored for this remarkable woman and her son. "I gave my horse to save your child," he said finally. "But somewhere along the way, I think he and his mother may have saved something in me." Katherine's expression softened. "What happens now, Isaac? Will you return to Blackwater Ranch? Continue drifting?" It was the question he'd been avoiding, the future he couldn't quite envision because every path seemed to lead away from what he suddenly, desperately wanted. "What would you have me do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Katherine stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "I would have you stay," she said simply. "Help me build something here. Something lasting." "The West takes everything you love eventually," Isaac said, giving voice to the fear that had governed him for so long. "I've seen it happen too many times." "Perhaps," Katherine acknowledged. But it also gives so much beauty, freedom, possibility. Her hand found his. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to reach for it, love. In that moment, standing in the dusty corral with the woman who had unwittingly claimed his heart, Isaac Newcombe faced the truth he'd been avoiding for weeks. The real danger wasn't in caring too much, it was in never caring enough to risk the pain that might come with love. "I'm not good with words," he said finally, "never have been. But if you're asking me to stay to help you build a life here," he paused, gathering courage, "there's nothing I want more." Catherine's smile bloomed slowly, transforming her face with a joy that took his breath away. "Then stay," she said. "Not out of obligation or duty, but because this could be your home too. Because William already looks at you like you hung the moon. Because I." Isaac didn't let her finish. Pulling her gently into his arms, he kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded with equal fervor. It was a kiss that spoke of new beginnings, of walls crumbling, of a future neither had dared imagine until this moment. When they finally parted, Catherine's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with emotion. "Well," she said, a touch breathlessly, "I suppose that answers my question." Isaac laughed, a free, unburdened sound he scarcely recognized as his own. "I reckon it does." They returned to the cabin hand in hand, to the men who had stood with them and the child who rushed to greet them with unrestrained enthusiasm. As William launched himself into Isaac's arms, chattering excitedly about the day's adventure, Isaac caught Catherine's gaze over the boy's head. In her eyes he saw not just the promise of love, but the possibility of the one thing he'd denied himself for so long: a home, a family, roots that would anchor him against whatever storms the West might bring. The celebration continued into the evening, with food and stories shared around a bonfire in the yard. As darkness fell, their defenders gradually departed, returning to their own lives with promises to visit and the satisfaction of having stood against injustice. Finally, only Isaac, Katherine, and a sleeping William remained. The boy had dozed off on a blanket near the dying fire, exhausted by the day's excitement. Isaac carefully lifted him, carrying him into the cabin and settling him in his small bed while Katherine watched from the doorway. "He trusts you completely," she observed as Isaac tucked the blanket around William's shoulders. "It usually takes him time to warm to people." "He's a good judge of character," Isaac replied, brushing a strand of hair from the boy's forehead. "Smart, brave, kind, like his mother." They stepped out onto the porch, where the night air carried the scent of pine and the distant howl of a coyote. Above them, stars scattered across the velvet sky in a display of magnificence unique to the western night. "I meant what I said earlier," Katherine said after a comfortable silence. "I want you to stay, Isaac, not as our protector or defender, but as—" She hesitated, perhaps uncertain how to define what was growing between them. Isaac took her hands in his. "As family," he suggested quietly. Her eyes widened slightly, then warmed with understanding. "Yes," she breathed, "as family." "I've been alone a long time," Isaac admitted. "Told myself it was safer that way, that caring too much in a place like this was asking for heartbreak. And now," he looked out at the land stretching before them, 15 acres of promise, of hard work and potential reward, of a future he'd never allowed himself to envision. "Now I'm thinking some things are worth the risk, that maybe the West doesn't just take, maybe sometimes it gives exactly what you need, exactly when you need it." Katherine leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "When William fell ill, I was terrified I would lose him, that I'd be truly alone in this wild place. Instead, I found you." She looked up at him. "The man who gave his last horse to save my child." "Best decision I ever made," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. "Though I have to admit, at the time I was just thinking of getting the boy to Joseph. I wasn't expecting." "To find a family," Katherine supplied when he trailed off. "To find home," Isaac corrected gently. "Wherever you and William are, that's home to me now, if you'll have me." Catherine's answer came not in words, but in the way she turned to face him fully, her hands framing his face as she drew him down for a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future. In the days and weeks that followed, Isaac threw himself into building that future with a dedication that surprised even him. Together, they repaired the damage Hollister's men had done, expanded the garden, and reinforced the corral. Isaac taught William to ride on Dusty, the mare showing remarkable patience with her young student. Katherine proved herself as capable as she'd claimed, working alongside Isaac from dawn to dusk, learning the skills needed to make the land productive. Word spread throughout the territory about the stand at Zimmerman Ranch, and with it came unexpected opportunities. Neighboring homesteaders, impressed by the community defense Isaac had organized, sought his advice on protecting their own properties. The Blackwater Ranch offered to buy their fall vegetables at fair prices. Marshall Burke recommended Isaac for a position on the Territorial Land Commission, valuing his first-hand knowledge of water rights and land use. Through it all, the bond between Isaac and Katherine deepened, moving from cautious attraction to a love grounded in mutual respect and shared purpose. William thrived under their combined care, his natural exuberance tempering Isaac's tendency toward solemnity, his curious mind a constant reminder of why they worked so hard to secure his future. When autumn painted the surrounding hills in gold and crimson, Isaac took Katherine to a spot overlooking the property, a gentle rise where wildflowers still bloomed despite the approaching winter. "I have something to ask you," he said, uncharacteristically nervous as he reached into his pocket. "Something I've been thinking about since the day Hollister rode away." Katherine waited, her expression curious but patient. "I'm not a wealthy man," Isaac began, "don't have much besides my name and my willingness to work, but I love you, Katherine. You and William have become everything to me." He withdrew a small wooden box from his pocket. "I carved this myself, not as fine as store-bought, but—" "It's perfect," Katherine interrupted, her eyes shining as she recognized the purpose of the moment. Isaac opened the box to reveal a simple gold band, his mother's ring, the one possession he'd kept through all his years of wandering. "Katherine Zimmerman, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of letting me be a father to William and a partner to you for all our days?" Her yes was immediate and joyful, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him with abandon. When they finally separated, both breathless and laughing, Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger. "It fits," she marveled. "Like it was made for you," Isaac agreed, a sense of rightness settling over him. Like all of this was meant to be, somehow. They were married 2 weeks later in a ceremony attended by the men who had stood with them against Hollister, by Joseph Little Crow and his family, by neighbors and newfound friends. William stood proudly at Isaac's side, solemnly presenting the rings when asked, his young face alight with the joy of officially gaining a father. That night, as Katherine slept beside him in what was now truly their home, Isaac reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a drifting cowboy convinced that attachment meant vulnerability, to a husband, father, and landowner with roots sunk deep into soil he was proud to call his own. The West might indeed take everything eventually, as his old fear had warned. But it had also given him something he'd never expected to find, a love worth the risk, a family worth protecting, a home worth building. All because he'd given his last horse to save a widow's child. As if sensing his thoughts, Dusty nickered softly from the corral outside their window. Isaac smiled in the darkness. The mare had earned her rest, her heroism rewarded with a permanent home, and the adoration of a boy who brought her apples and brushed her coat with devoted care. "What are you thinking about?" Katherine's sleepy voice came from beside him. Isaac drew her closer. "About how everything changed because of one decision, one moment of choosing to help rather than ride away." She murmured, nestling against his chest. "The moment you gave your last horse to save my son. And found everything I never knew I was looking for," Isaac completed the thought, pressing a kiss to her hair. Outside, the western night wrapped around their small cabin, stars illuminating the land that was now their legacy. Within those walls, surrounded by the family he'd found through one act of compassion, Isaac Newcombe's heart, once guarded and solitary, beat with the steady rhythm of a man who had finally come home.